My first guest was with Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas was the first successor to Stan Lee as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. I mean, this guy's just a legend. He's well known as the creator of Wolverine and Vision, but he also introduced Conan the Barbarian to American comics. He wrote for The Avengers, The Defenders, Invaders, Uncanny X-Men, Thor, Iron Fist, Secret Origins, Young All-Stars. Again, created Wolverine and Vision. Also Carol Danvers, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Ultron, Yellow Jacket, Defenders, Man-Thing, Red Sonja. And this guy, I'm telling you, he's a Nighthawk, Valkyrie. He was inducted into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame in 2011 and into the Harvey Awards Hall of Fame this year, 2022. If there was a Mount Rushmore for the comic book industry, Roy Thomas would definitely be up on that mountain. So enjoy Frank Talks with Roy Thomas.
This is Roy Thomas, and you're listening to Frank Talks.
Welcome, everybody, to Frank Talks. That's right. We are sitting here with, let me just put it this way. The Mount Rushmore of Marvel has 4 names on it. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and without a doubt, the man who saved Marvel, actually a few times, and is the de facto protege of Stan Lee, none other than rascally Roy Thomas is with us today. That's right, Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm already embarrassed, though, that Mount Rushmore thing. I've heard that before. I don't know.
You've also heard rascally Roy Thomas, too.
Well, that's okay. I heard that from Stan all the time. He made it up. I wasn't rascally at all. That was just, it just happened to start with an R. Was all.
Really?
Yeah. Occasionally earlier, I was also Rollicking Roy, but that dropped out.
Rollicking Roy? What is that all about?
Nothing. It was an R. Stan went more by, Dapper Don or Dapper this or Gentleman this.
Right.
It didn't mean anything to Stan. He smiled a fair amount, and Jack Kirby wasn't especially jolly.
Wow.
But he was just fine somewhere. And all of a sudden, people are genial this and they're jolly that. and all of a sudden, we start playing to those prototypes, and people get to know me and say, why did he call you Rascally Roy? I was very laid back, Bob Newhart and the button-down mind.
Okay,
say,
yeah,
I was
sure.
buttoned down. I was
Were you really?
Yeah. When I first started there, I was wearing a suit and a vest, and that's how I showed up at the office. A suit and a vest.
A suit and a vest?
Yeah, well,
wow.
Yeah. Well, of course, remember, I bought this for DC. You remember? And at DC, they made people wear suits because I came to New York to work for DC.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, well, you're one of the 12 people that's ever heard of me that don't know that. That's good.
Wow. So you must have known Bob Kane?
I met him later.
Did you?
But he wasn't around the office much. He didn't do anything. He just got other people to draw.
Oh, okay, nice.
No, but what happened is I was a teacher in my early 20s in the St. Louis area. First year was on Route 66 between St. Louis and Head Points West.
Okay.
But then I spent 3 years around just south of St. Louis. First time I lived in a big city.
Right.
I was from about 100 miles south of there, near the Mississippi. I hated teaching high school. That's what I drifted into simply because I had no idea of what I wanted to do. So,
okay.
If you're a teacher, hey, I got to read a few books, and you got 3 months off in the summer, even if you didn't make any money.
So that was my wife, exactly.
Yeah, and my mother would talk about accounting and stuff, had no interest for me.
Right.
So I thought I could get by with teaching, but, I hated it. The first year of teaching, that's about the time we discovered comics fandom.
Okay.
And so forth. And so I'd spend all my time in the evenings when I should have been grading papers. I'd spend a minimal, but mostly I spent it on fanzines,
right.
Either reading comics, writing about comics. Sure. But I wanted to get out of teaching. So I had a friend, became a lawyer later. He was my roommate at the time. He knew I'd wanted to get out. A couple of years earlier, I had almost become an Egyptologist if I'd had the money to go to school. I was accepted at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, one of the top schools in the world for Egyptology. But, didn't have any money, so I let that go. Egyptology's loss, his comic books loss, And he was being feted at the time because and he told me it was 12 times, so I memorized it. He says he was the youngest 32nd degree Mason in the state. That didn't mean anything to me, but it meant something to a lot of the Masons at those meetings he went to. Yeah. So, he got kind of lionized as being the young guy and everything. Right. He was like 20, 21. So he got to know these people, and he said, I felt there's a fellowship to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. in foreign relations. Nobody ever takes it, but it's just sitting there. It's several $1,000s, and so forth a year. I said, well, what do I have to do to get it if it gets me out of teaching? He said, you just have to show up and have an interview. So I went in. So I drive into St. Louis. I drive in somewhere near St. Louis U, and I talked to some old guy, probably 50 or 60, many years younger than I am now.
Right.
And I walk out with this big fellowship that I didn't do anything to deserve. He didn't know what I knew. I had a good grade average. I had no specialties in foreign relations. My idea of that would have been a date with Brigitte Bardot at the time.
Okay.
And right after that, in the late winter, early spring, I get a letter from Mort Weisinger, who was the editor of all the Superman books, the 7 or 8 books, Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, even World's Finest, but it was Superman, Superboy. He's the only one of the editors there, except the romance editor, who really had an assistant.
Okay.
It was a big enough deal that Batman didn't, but Superman did. So he needed to hire a new assistant. He wasn't happy with the one he had, even though he was a good guy. So I was offered that job, kind of a trial basis.
Wow.
Gives me a salary, $110 a week, which was not that bad by the time. It's at least what I was making as a teacher, although more expensive in New York. So I head off to New York to do it. When I show up, and he knew exactly when I was coming, always says, well, I can't start paying you till next week. I'm a teacher. I got no money.
You're going in with this.
Yeah, right. I'm going in. If I show up with the money, I can't. You can hang around this week. We'll show you the ropes.
Right.
But I can't pay you till next week. I said, and he says, and it's $100 a week. I said, well, you said in the letter 110.
Yeah, what happened?
He said, well, the only explanation I ever got, and this is a direct quote, he says, I can't pay you more than I'm paying that idiot down there. He meant my farmer assistant. First of all, I was replacing the farmer. Why couldn't he pay me more?
Right, exactly.
Secondly, he had offered it to me.
Right.
But what have I got? Suddenly he's decreased my stuff by 10%.
Yeah, he's already cutting you $40 a month. What's going on?
And I just haven't started work yet.
Jeez.
So anyway, I hang around. I do it because I got very little choice now. Except that I still have in my hip pocket somewhere, I still have that fellowship. So
I was going to say,
if it didn't work out that summer, this is like June.
Sure.
I still got a month or so to throw it together to try to become, Woody Allen, you say, in case of war, I'm a hostage. That would have been my contributions to foreign relations. And but the thing is, I don't know if you know anything about the legend of Mort Weisinger now. He was fairly famous then, but he was an absolute bastard.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
And that was from his friends. A little like Walt.
Yeah, except for the famous Batman artist Dick Sprang. I never heard, even his old friend Julie Schwartz, who had known him since a teenager, didn't have much nice to say about him. And
about Walt or Dick Sprang?
About Mort.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, about Mort, yeah. In fact, he said when Mort Weisinger dies, his gravestone's going to say, "Here lies Mort Weisinger, as usual."
Man, wow.
Yeah. But Mort was a talented guy. He had written the first stories of Aquaman, Green Arrow, Johnny Quick, a bunch of characters. He had talent. He had been an editor at startling pulp magazines before coming to D.C. He was a talented guy.
Wow.
But his system of coming up with stories was to get a writer in for Superman, one of his 3 or 4 Superman writers, hear his ideas, tell him they were no good, and then give those ideas to the next writer who came in saying they were his, as if somehow these writers were never going to talk and discover Mort's just recycling our ideas.
Right.
But he was a good editor in the sense he knew how to develop the post-Superman TV show.
Okay. Is that with George Reeves?
Yeah. After that, the late 58 or so, whatever, that's when Mort came into his own, and that's when the Superman thing really expanded, and you got Bizarro, and you got Supergirl, and you got the Bottle City, and you got all these all these things that you couldn't really do as much when it was on TV, because they'd say, well, this isn't on TV, And for those late 50s and early 60s years, he had all these weird stuff and the imaginary stories. He was just sadistic. If I missed something, like there was some made-up country with about a 10 or 15-letter name, and in one place, it's mentioned twice in the story, and once 2 letters got transposed, I didn't see it, so he raked me over the coal. When I found something else, some other thing, he was in the service during World War II, I guess. He says, when I was in the service, we call this chicken shit, if you found something. Sure. So I was actually, I'm not the tenderest guy in the world. I'd been a teacher several years. I was an adult. I was 24. But I went back to my room at the hotel I was staying at briefly until I got out of the place. And I'd feel tears because here was this dream job I thought I wanted in comics.
Right.
I hadn't pushed for it real hard. It had just come to me out of the blue. But here I am, and suddenly I find out I'm working for Frankenstein, or something. But I got to try to make it. Luckily, Julie Schwartz, although I didn't see much of him, was the editor of The Flash, Green Lantern, Justice League, the books I really liked. And
so cool.
And he wanted me to do some work for him. Well, ordinarily those DC editors were very protective. They didn't like their people, but evidently he was happy with me working for Julie. Eventually, maybe. So I was looking forward to maybe better times. I was determined to make it, but then I made this weird decision. I wanted to meet Stan Lee.
Right.
Because Stan was writing what were obviously the best comics, at the time.
Sure.
You could argue what Kirby or others contributed, but I'm talking even just about the dialogue, and I'm talking from the day I saw Fantastic Four #1, and I knew that writing was better than what the guys I liked at DC were
right,
doing. So,
right.
and one Stan had sent me a Spider-Man issue I had missed in the early days, the first Sandman story. And I wrote into Marvel, could I buy it? And he sent me a copy, free. That's the only contact we ever had
really?
till the day I met him. Except he'd read a review I wrote of Fantastic Four #1 that came out about 2 weeks after the book went on sale. He said it was a good book.
Sure.
And said he remembered my name, and he mentioned it in a letter to my friend. And I was thrilled. Stan Lee mentioned my name in a letter. That's as good as it could get. I wanted to meet him, so I wrote him a letter saying I'd like to buy him a drink sometime. Well, he wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. He lived on Long Island, didn't like to fraternize with anybody. He said, but he wanted me to take a writer's test. He said, we've been looking for a writer. I found out later they'd put an ad in the New York Times and had about 100 people, according to production manager Saul Brodsky. And, Stan just didn't find anything he liked. He'd had a few other professional writers that also worked at DC writing for him, but he wasn't that happy with any of them.
Okay.
And they didn't last long, mostly. So he was looking for a writer because, he's writing 9 or 10 books a month. I didn't know that he was looking, you figured he just wanted to do that.
Well, I would think so, yeah.
But he didn't. It's too much, it's a lot of work, and, he didn't really want to do it. So he was looking for a writer he kind of train in his style or something. And I guess it occurred to him, too, maybe a younger guy was better than an older guy at that stage. So I took this test, never met him. I just showed up at the office on my lunch hour, sneaking over from D.C., took it back the next day, but I never met Stan. And then the next morning after I turned it in, I got a call at D.C. while I was proofreading a Supergirl story, probably missing something. And I got a phone call from the secretary in her high-pitched voice that I recognized, Flo Steinberg. Fabulous Flo Steinberg, they would call her there. Another one of Stan's. She wasn't especially fabulous, nice person she was, but it started with an F, so she's fabulous. So said, Roy would like to meet you, Stan would like to meet you at lunch. So I sneak over at lunch, and about 15 we start talking around and so forth, and then Stan asking him, what do readers think of the continued stories? It was kind of a controversy in fandom then that Marvel having continued stories because you had to, and so forth, and some readers didn't like them because you had to not miss an issue.
Sure.
Sometimes the distribution was a little spotty. So Stan says, they hate them, but I'm going to keep on doing them because otherwise I can't remember what I do from month to month, and it just gives me a starting point.
Wow, that's funny.
So about 15 or so minutes after we met, he's on the 4th or 5th floor, whatever. He's looking out over the window of Madison Avenue. He had binoculars. Sometime he'd look at the girls walking up and down, And he said, he says, what do we have to do to hire you away from National? National's what they called DC. It wasn't called DC then, really. For several years, really. It had the symbol there, but they didn't use that term. And so I said, just to offer me a job. The guy offered me $110 a week. I didn't.
Did he at least match it?
Yeah, I didn't mention the 100. Because
the $10 less.
Right? So he says, we'll give you that. So all right. So I said, well, I'll do it, but I said I got to give him 2 weeks or more notice.
Sure. That's an honorable
thing. He advanced me a little money to New York, and he expected I can't leave him in the lurch. Then said, well, I want you to start as soon as possible, but if it takes 2-3 weeks, okay. But he's a little disappointed, because he can get started. Stan was a guy of enthusiasm, and once he had you, he wanted to get going.
Sure.
And here now he's going to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks, and I might change my mind or whatever.
Right.
Fat chance of that. But anyway, I knew a better deal when I saw it. Even though Marvel at that time, of course, was a much, much smaller company, distributed by DC, and really just a third or a fourth the size of it even then. But Mort, I guess, had been hearing from other people. They had this idea that somebody evidently had particularly told him that, evidently I found out later, that, he says, this guy, meaning me, didn't seem like he was going to take all the abuse like the previous guy had.
Right.
And, so somehow Mort was thinking maybe he should try to be a little nicer. So he sort of said that. Says, people have been telling me, maybe I'm a little hard on you and this and that. He starts talking, So I'd let him go on for a minute or two, and because I'm trying to figure out how to break him the news, because I'm a half an hour late coming back from lunch.
Okay.
Right away,
Yeah, right.
And I said, well, Mort, it's very nice. I appreciate this, but I said, I have to tell you, I've accepted a job working for Stan Lee over at Marvel. And he just, stared at me because he's certainly not expecting that. And I said, however, I told him that, I'll go on working for as long as I need to, 2-3 weeks, whatever you need to replace me. He says, I think you should hire the other guy back, Nelson Bridwell, which he did, and he worked out fine. I said, but I'll stay as long, 2-3 weeks, whatever, so you can get another person. Stan said, and Mort says, you're a spy for Stan Lee. Get out. No. So like what was Stan Lee spying on Superman for? I don't know. Anyway, so he kicks me out. So 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, I'm back at Marvel and talking to Stan. Hey, I'm back already. The bad penny has shown up
So
again.
Stan was probably, I guess, happy that you were ready to start.
He gave me a Millie the Model story to dialogue over the weekend, so I doubled my income right away. So I worked for DC for 2 weeks, 2 4-day weeks. Because there had been a July 4th holiday there.
Right.
But I was only paid for one of them, 1 4-day.
Did you at least get the 110?
From Stan, yeah.
Oh, no.
Never from him. Oh,
never
from
him.
No, I got the 100.
Oh, you got
Yeah.
that one. So he still owes you $10.
But it was for a 4-day week. Well, he claimed I never paid back the $50 advance for the airfare, but I think I did. But if I didn't, it's okay. Too bad. Screw you, Mart.
But you became close friends with Stan. Thank God for John Cimino, by the way, because without that guy, I'm just so glad that you didn't become the Jim Finger of Stan Lee's Bob Kane, if you know what I mean. Because you were one of the main reasons why I even do what I do today, not just with podcasting, but also with
You're not going to blame that on me now. You can't.
I do blame you. I blame you totally. You should take full responsibility for that.
Yeah, all right.
Tell me a little bit about your last meeting with Stan.
Well, that was in November of 2018.
Okay.
Turned out to be 30-something hours before he died, less than 40, certainly.
Wow.
Of course, we didn't know that. We knew he was kind of fading, and he hadn't wanted to see anybody. What happened is, at Halloween, most years, except at the COVID years or whatever, we'd throw a big Halloween party for 50, 80 people or something in neighborhood, because they came in costume.
Did you come in your original Spider-Man costume?
No, we sold that one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
but... No. My wife had dressed me up as a dolphin or
a dolphin. You're working at Marvel. How do you not dress up as one of those characters?
She bought me a Vision costume, but it was bloated out with balloons, and I just wouldn't wear it. It looked so awful. I said, "This doesn't look like the Vision. I ain't gonna wear this thing." So, or I'd be a Snow White, or as I call myself, Snow White. But
were you happy with Paul Bellamy's Vision? Were you happy with that?
Oh yeah, it was good. Yeah, okay. I wanted to see him in the real costume sometime occasionally, and they fooled around with it, joked about it too much. But it was a good show, WandaVision. Only thing I'm disappointed is that they haven't found a way to bring the Vision back. I want to see him back. I don't care if he's green and yellow or if he's white or whatever version, but I want to see him back.
Exactly.
I'm not that interested in the Scarlet Witch. I'm real interested in the Vision and Ultron. So John knew a dealer who did a lot of work getting Stan's signature and so forth. So he said, and he knew that I had almost flown out a few months earlier, 6 months or so earlier, to see Stan when he had a different manager, a handler for a while. And then it kind of fell through because that guy got kicked out or whatever. So he arranged, and this guy said, "Well, we know the guy who's Stan's handler companion now." And he arranged the whole thing. And John said that he asked Stan. Stan was really feeling kind of down. He didn't really want to see many people anymore. But he said, he kind of sparked to my name. He said, "Yeah, he'd be happy to see Roy."
Sure.
So I fly all the way across the country, as does John. We at our own expense, we flew all the way across the country just so on the chance that Stan would be okay that day to see us. Because if he didn't feel well, we were just out of luck, and that was that. We knew we were taking a chance. About a half an hour was all he could manage, but he was pretty dapper, sitting up there in his his sunglasses.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of him. I'm like, he looks exactly like Stan Lee.
And he's staring. Yeah, he's old. He's kind of tired, but he was
still there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, his mind was still fairly sharp. He just got tired early. First thing he says to me is, "This living to be 100 years old isn't as much fun as I thought it might be, or as I hoped it might be." I said, "Well, but
wow.
he's doing pretty good. He was going to be 96 in about a month.
Oh, okay.
So he was doing all right, and until the last year,
right.
He'd been still doing pretty well. He'd shrunk several inches from being 6'2" or whatever it was to not looking like about my height, and everything. But he was still getting around to that last year when his wife died, and things just kind of. The age and the situation were just kind of catching up with him.
I can only imagine, sure.
And I think he was kind of getting ready to go. It wasn't like he was trying to hang on to every little bit. But as long as he was there, he'd sign things for increasing amounts of money.
Sure. Right.
And so we talked for a little bit, and he'd ask, "How's the farm?" He was always fascinated by the fact that this guy, even though I was a small town person originally, this guy that he knew mainly from New York and then later in L.A., lived on a farm with like dozens and dozens of animals. Cattle, pigs, donkeys, llamas, dogs, everything, toucans running around. And so he'd have my wife, Dan, take some pictures or film to show it, because he couldn't see me on a farm or anything like that, Well, nobody could really. But, I really liked it,
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, come out." He says, "Oh, I got 40 acres. You can walk around, And we had a good little time. But after a little bit, he was getting, kind of tired and everything. They brought by a copy of the book I had written about him for Taschen, which he had recommended me for,
Okay.
this big 17-pound book that was about to come out. And the guy from his company is there with the book, one of the first copies. He says, this is the book. And he says, how much is this going to be? It's going to be an edition of about 1,000 copies.
Okay.
He says, it's like $1,500. Stan's eyes go. He says, who the hell is going to buy it? Well, as it turned out, he died a day or two later. It sold out in about a week.
Wow.
Wow. Then they had the mass version that came out later for, for only $200.
Sure.
But they were almost identical.
Wow.
Anyway, so
that's
but
amazing.
it was really nice to see Stan and everything. But you could tell he was getting tired. His manager John Bolerjack was really the best thing that happened to him. He was devoted to him. He was professional. He was good to him. He wanted nothing in return. And so he was just a good guy.
Right.
And he watched out for Stan, and so Stan when he got retired, he introduced him to John near the end, and we got John took a couple photographs.
Sure.
Then John Bolerjack took a photograph of the three of us. And then we left, and of course, less than 48 hours later, got the news that he had passed away and everything. And
wow.
I was, not too surprised, but
It's amazing.
I always
that you
wanted to think he'd
spend
go on
that time
forever.
with him, though. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. I feel I owe John Cimino and John Bolerjack a lot for arranging
That's
that for
fantastic,
me.
man.
I mean, it's not like we were ever you said close friends. We weren't even friends, Stan and I. Really, I mean, in the loose sense of the word. Sure, we sort of liked each other 90% of the time.
Well, he did hire you.
He hired me. He fired me.
He fired you.
Well,
I wish we had time for that story. Gee whiz.
About that. Yeah, well, it's out there, But within a few, months of, he wanted me off the editor job because I wasn't enough of a company man at that stage. And he's right in that sense.
Okay.
I was going to go to D.C., but he wanted me to stay on, and so I signed a writer-editor contract. As long as I didn't have to work for any other editor except him, I'd stay there, and I did that for another several years, and later then left for D.C.
As we close out here at the Willsboro Comic-Con,
you're throwing me out?
I'm going to fire you. I want a chance to fire Roy Thomas.
Everybody does eventually. Everyone does. It's your turn.
Have you done anything on your own outside of Marvel, DC? Any kind of books or writing on your own?
I was never that interested in doing it, but at the same time, once I left DC contract, I did so much leave that I could go on working for him, but there was no contract or guarantee anymore after 86. So I signed a couple of things where I owned the characters. I actually made up a character called Alter Ego, who is the same fanzine name, only as a superhero.
Okay.
And my wife and I made up another thing that I named Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt, which is a father and son team.
Nice.
That was actually optioned for a film.
That's kind of cool.
Once by Joe Wazan, who was the producer of things like Jeremiah Johnson.
Okay.
But he never quite managed to make a movie out of it. He never could crack how to make a movie. And there were several people interested in Alter Ego as a movie property.
That's a great name, Alter Ego.
Yeah. I wish I could say I invented it. It was my friend Jerry Bales, who was the Detroit College professor, actually was the founder of Alter Ego. He named it, and I was sort of like his, he said a co-editor, but I just helped by writing and drawing.
No, but you did co-create Spider-Man, Vision, Morbius. You did
not
all these
Spider-Man.
guys. Oh, you weren't. I thought you were co-creator
of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Oh God, I wish.
Oh wow, I thought. Okay, I was mistaken.
No. I just bought Spider-Man or Amazing Fantasy 15 on the stands in '62.
You still have that?
Else. Yeah, I bound them all, and they've gotten some water damage, but they're worth more than the 10 or 12 cents I paid for them. I'll give you that. Anyway.
That's still amazing. What would you say to somebody just starting out, wanting to produce their own comic book? What would be a word of advice for them?
Well, of course, my experience pushing 60 years ago now, 57 years ago, would not be very apropos of anything now.
Maybe not with the technology, but at least with your experience.
The main thing is, there's one thing, that one of the things that made me come to attention at the time was I was helped. By that time, I had become the editor and publisher of Alter Ego, inheriting it. So I was writing articles for it. I was editing other people's articles for it. I was pasting it up and doing everything. I was drawing some cartoons, even though I wasn't primarily an artist.
Sure.
So, and I was sending that in to Stan. But also more to the DC people or anybody I knew, to give them to get some feedback and letters and so forth. Sending them into Julie Schwartz and Mort Weisinger, people I knew or people I didn't know.
Sure.
That sort of brought me to the attention of Julie and Mort Weisinger. Stan knew about it vaguely. The modern day equivalent of that would just be nowadays, actually, in some ways easier, less expensive. I would say just get it out there and don't give up. Don't do something if that doesn't work. First of all, you better enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, just keep on doing it. Have an eye toward the main chance. And the other thing I always tell people, this is the most important advice. You write this down. Be lucky.
Be lucky.
Be lucky. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't tell you how to do this. This was Stan's big thing too. He says luck is such a huge factor in everything. You got to be the right person, but you got to be at the right time and the right place.
Right.
You can only try to be the right person. You don't know what the right place is. Did I know that the right?
And I think there's a certain.
Did I know that the right
something about that?
The right place and time to become, to do all the stuff I did with Marvel and other places was to go to work for DC.
Right, I see what you mean.
Or to do a fanzine. You just do it. You throw yourself out there, and then you look for the main chance when it comes along, and you do it. When DC didn't work out as well, I went to Marvel. When I kind of soured on Marvel because I didn't like the new editor and the new editorial arrangement, I went to DC. I'm very happy I went in a certain way. It wasn't good for my career, probably, but I got to write All-Star Squadron that I made up, which was my favorite comic to write of all time.
Wow.
And then I came back to Marvel, and, never been, as integral to Marvel as I was if I hadn't left, perhaps.
Right.
But, I had a good life in spite of it.
That's awesome, man. Dude, it was a pleasure. Is there anything you want to drop on our listeners before we leave?
No, just keep reading comic books. I don't want to see them all just be online or just the movie versions or the streaming versions. Let's keep those comic books alive. Graphic novels are great. Let's keep what Dick Giordano used to call the pamphlets, the 32-page, 36 with covers books. Let's support them too, and
the pamphlets.
keep them alive and so forth. So that there's a print medium too. Don't make it all be out there in the ether and cyber world.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
Forth. And
It's stuck in your head and never on paper.
I've always been a superhero fan primarily, but I liked westerns and humor and a little bit of everything, And even if I don't read many comics anymore as such, except I'd like to read the old stuff from the 40s or 50s,
Sure.
For the heck of it. And because I do Alter Ego, my comics history magazine, and that deals with the period from the 40s on up through the 70s. After which point my interest drops off the map. I'm just very enthusiastic about the farm. I love the superheroes, but I'm just so glad there's so many things now. They can be adult novels, they can be manga, which I don't happen to like myself, but it's a wonderful farm, and it's great that it's so popular. I want to see graphic novels, I want to see educational ones and history, and we always used to say there should be very few things that you can do in a novel or a nonfiction book that you can't do in a comic or a graphic novel. And nowadays people are proving that's true, and they're not just for kids anymore.
Right.
I wish there were a few more for kids. We never wanted them to be for kids, and now the average comic book reader is probably about 80, like me. I don't know.
Well, our thing, Legends of Alduria, is for kids, so that's why I was asking you about people starting their own comics. What would you suggest? That's why I was asking you that. This has been fantastic. Where can people find you online?
I've never been on Facebook or Twitter, or any of this stuff in my entire life, and I don't intend to start now. But
good.
I do have a Facebook presence because my manager and friend John Cimino has on Facebook. It's called the Roy Thomas Appreciation Board. Now you don't have to actually appreciate me to be on there. There's a lot of stuff about other comics.
You're very, very humble. But you should be proud of that, by the way.
But look up the Roy Thomas Appreciation Board.
The Roy Thomas Appreciation Board on Facebook that John Cimino put together.
He always lets things know what I'm doing. There's a lot of other people get on there too, and so forth. And it's kind of, even my sister's a member.
Oh, nice. There you go. You got some family support.
Yeah, right.
Roy, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for being on Frank Talks, and we will catch up soon, I hope.
Okay, thank you very much.
Roy, let's talk a little Wolverine, shall we?
I've heard of that character, yeah.
1974, correct?
Right.
So he was originally designed as an enemy or a villain for the Hulk, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the idea was never that he was going to be a villain, really, because...
More like a foil for the Hulk.
No, not even for the Hulk.
Really?
The Hulk had nothing to do with it. The Hulk was just a convenience. What happened is, one day, and I probably meant to stand before I did it, but I didn't need his approval. I was the editor-in-chief at that stage, and unless it was a major thing, which Wolverine was not at that time, I could have just done it.
There was no X-Men for him to join.
No, there was no X-Men.
Exactly, that's right.
So I decided, I may have told Stan, but but it was my idea that I figured, we got several % of our readers are Canadian.
Sure.
In English and all that, right?
Okay.
They already read the same books, they weren't even new covers, right? They're just the same ones, and so forth. So I thought, I had made up Banshee is an Irish mutant, and Sunfire is a Japanese one.
Okay.
And I thought, a couple other characters here and there, and I thought, we needed a Canadian character. With all these characters we got, we should have one lousy Canadian, you know. And of course, it's selfish too in a way. I mean, you know, we might make a few Canadian people buy a comic book.
Sure.
They were already buying them. They might buy a few more if they had a Canadian hero, and then why not? You know?
Right.
I'd been to Canada a couple of times, you know, visiting a few people, knew a few people there. So I thought about animals. It wouldn't have had to be an animal, but they've had, you know, Captain Canada, Captain Canuck kind of stuff. So I wanted something different. So I thought, an animal's good. You know, we always liked animal creatures, you know. When I was a kid, my first hero was Frank Buck, the famous Bring 'Em Back Alive animals in Africa and Southeast Asia for the zoo. And he was one of my heroes. I read his books and I saw some movies of him. And, you know, Clyde Beatty was a big deal there, too. I wanted to be, at one time, for about 50 minutes, wanted to be a big game hunter, that kind of thing. You know? But the Bring 'Em Back Alive part, I didn't so much want to shoot them, catch them. But I always knew about animals. I'd go to the zoo in St. Louis every year. I'd buy the books, and I knew a lot more about animals than the usual kid. So I knew what a Wolverine was since I was a young age. And I thought about a badger. That's another animal that could be in Canada as well as the United States. But a badger didn't sound that good.
Badger doesn't have a ring like Wolverine does.
Badger sounds like you're annoying people. You badger them.
But
Wolverine has that wolfish sound.
It does, yes.
And I wasn't thinking of a sports team or anything like that because, you know, sports never meant anything to me. I decided that I wanted a character called Wolverine. He's Canadian. He's short. Small, because a Wolverine's a relatively small animal, and it's known to attack animals 10, 20 times its size. It's so fierce. So I called in Len Wein, and the reason the Hulk is in the Hulk has nothing to do with the Hulk, except for the fact that most of the heroes, they were in New York. Daredevil was in maybe San Francisco. This was going to be a Canadian character, so it wasn't going to be in the States. And a Hulk was always on the run somewhere. And as it happened, Len was about to write some stories that could have been in Canada anyway by coincidence, because I wanted to do it right away. I didn't want to say, I don't want it to be 6 months from now. I didn't know I was going to be leaving the company, you know, leaving the editorship in a couple of months. But I just wanted
to be followed by Jim Shooter.
No, that's several years.
That was more.
There were 4 in between.
Oh, really? I thought it was right after you.
Len Wein, Marv Wolfman, Jerry Conway, Archie Goodwin were all in between. So I called Len in and I said, you know, right away, you know, and it turned out to be work out coincidentally. And he did this because he was doing with this Wendigo story. I said, do you want to just get this story there right away because I want this character to exist. But he was never going to be a villain except, in a story he's got to fight the Hulk. But he was created to be a hero, but with Marvel there was not much difference. And so he just, but I left it to him past that point. One reason that I liked him doing it, I told him so, wasn't the main reason I chose him. It's just because he was a good writer and he was doing the Hulk. If somebody else was doing the Hulk, somebody else would have been the co-creator of Wolverine. If Jerry Conway had been writing the Hulk that time, he would be the co-creator. I see what you mean. It would be whoever did it.
That's interesting.
And the character would be a little different. Or if I had decided to write that issue, it would be a little different. You know? He would have looked the same because I had John Romita draw him first. John Romita to design the character. For Herb to draw, but Romita designed it.
How close is the character now than from John's first initial design?
They have a version of the costume and everything, but it got altered right away. The mask got kind of changed around, and so forth.
But what about him by himself? Just Frank Logan by himself?
Well, the thing is, until Dave Cockrum drew him a couple of issues in X-Men, there was no face for Wolverine. He's the guy in the mask, and you don't know what he looks like.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
So, and I think that Dave had already designed a face, kind of that he used, and so he threw that in.
So he used that. Okay.
As a matter of fact, Dave had once drawn a character called Wolverine that supposedly he might have showed me as one of a bunch of Legion of Superheroes types or something. It had nothing to do with my choice because I got Wolverine from knowing about animals. I don't remember anything about that. But Dave was always drawing characters. He showed me some characters he drew to try to get in the Legion of Superheroes. And he was doing it for DC.
Right.
And then he thought when I decided he should be the X-Men artist, for the new X-Men. He had a bunch of characters, but by that time Wolverine had already been, created.
Wow.
But I just got this character created because I wanted, and because Len, and I told Len this, it was true as far as it went. When I had made up with Stan the idea for a Brother Voodoo character, I'd had Len and because Len wrote some accents for the characters. Now, so he wrote the accents for Brother Voodoo. Now he gave Brother Voodoo, who was in Haiti, he gave him kind of a Jamaican accent, but it was an accent anyway. And I don't really do accents. I wasn't going to write that book anyway. Now, had I known what Wolverine was slated to become eventually, not because of me or Len or anything, but more because of Chris Claremont and people he worked with, Dave Cockrum and later Byrne, then I would have kicked Len off the book for Hulk for 1 month, and I would have written the story.
There you go, right.
And I'd have been collecting money for these shoes. But although I don't think Len ever got any money out of it either.
Really?
Anyway,
Wow.
I don't know why. So I just had Len, and I said, you handle access. Canadian accents, just saying A at the end of sentences sometimes.
That's right, eh?
And I said, but you do accents well. And so, but the main thing was just because he could get him in the Hulk right away.
Okay.
And once we got him in, I didn't care about him that much. He was no big deal. He's a character. Okay, now we got our Canadian hero. We'll find some other places to get him. He'll be in Daredevil, or he'll be in this, or he'll come down to New York, or somebody will go up to
You could put him in almost anything, really, and it would work.
Yeah, it's just the Hulk was an easy way to do it because the Hulk can be anywhere because he's always stomping around and leaping into
jumping. That's right.
So, but then he's out for the book right away, and you don't see him for several months. And it just so happened by coincidence that only a couple of months later came up the idea that turned into the revival of the X-Men. And if you're going to have an international X-Men, naturally you're going to have in some of the characters that you already have, and three of them were mine: Banshee, Sunfire, and Wolverine were mine. Co-creator. I'm not trying to take it away from the artist or from Len.
No, absolutely. I get you.
But I'd already done 3 characters like that, so 3 of those got into that first giant-size X-Men, and then along with the new ones that Dave and Len Wein made up.
So what about Wolverine coming into the multiverse? Could that possibly work?
I wanted him for the Marvel universe.
Right. Okay.
Obviously, there could be another version of him in another dimension. Maybe he's called the Badger or the Moose. I don't know.
The Moose.
I couldn't go on the
maple
moose.
syrup. That's right.
We need a dramatic animal,
That would have been dynamic.
Yeah, but there was already a moose in Archie too. And besides, mooses that's not that dramatic.
You don't want to go that way.
I never considered Moose. Only Badger and Wolverine. They had a copy of Wolverine, another company called the Badger.
Oh, see, well, they probably were like, they missed the Badger. They could have capitalized on this.
He was good too.
Frank Miller in the 80s put out a miniseries called Wolverine. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about that? Did you get a chance to read that? Or?
Well, I read it later. I mean, especially when Jerry Conway and I were doing a screenplay for an early version of an X-Men movie that didn't get made, but we wrote the screenplay and everything in the mid-'80s. So I read some of that stories. I never got into the idea of him being, a samurai type of thing. That never seemed right for him.
Yeah.
But that's okay. All I did and all that Len did, really, Len only wrote a couple of stories of him, and he didn't make much of an impact on him, except what Len did was he came up with that background of that, what became the Project X kind of stuff.
Okay.
That's all Len.
Yeah.
And he came up, and although the claws were drawn by Romita, and they were, the idea of the claws, but the idea that they come out of through his skin and all that, I mean, that was made up by other people.
Oh, that wasn't the original concept.
Well, it wasn't the concept I handed to Len because it was up to him. I just gave him
think of Wolverine. When you have the initial idea for Wolverine, how are you not thinking claws?
No, I was.
Oh, you were? Okay.
But the thing is, then I gave the assignment to John Romita. Well, they say John Romita Sr., but I don't use that because, at that time there was no John Romita Jr. in comics.
Right, you didn't need a senior, right.
So he was just John Romita, and he'll always be John Romita.
Right.
The thing is that I just gave John, as our art director, I could have just had Herb Trimpe, the artist, draw him. He would have done a fine job on it. But with some new characters, we give it to John because John was a good designer, and John didn't know what a Wolverine was.
Interesting.
So, first thing he says, he said this. He said he thought that was a female wolf.
Okay, you know what? That's not bad. Okay,
that's not bad. Well, that's one of the reasons I chose the name is because it sounded wolf-like, so it was better than Badger.
Yeah.
So John looks it up and finds out what it is. Everybody rediscovered the wheel. I told Len he had to be sharp and fierce.
Okay.
Len later says that Roy just gave, he sort of remembered just that I gave him the name and he's Canadian, but then I looked him up and found he was short and fierce. Well, that's true if you want to rediscover the wheel.
Sure.
Well, then nobody told John Romita what he is, so John Romita was always short and fierce. Everybody, so, I did it first, but everybody's rediscovering, he's short and he's fierce.
Yeah, what a great idea I had.
And they all have this great idea, except I had it first. But anyway, they did plenty of other stuff. Len and the others did plenty of other stuff. They didn't do that, but they did plenty. So John then designed the costume and gave it kind of the claw motif, and he has the claws sticking out.
Right.
But they could have been, claws. They didn't have to come from an exoskeleton. They could have just been natural claws. They could have been artificial claws.
Sure.
If I had written the character it would probably have been different from the way Len did it.
Okay.
He would have had a different background. He might not.
Sure.
What Len did that was nice was that I'm pleased with this. He made him a mutant right away, which you didn't automatically have to be, which made him ideal to go in the X-Men anyway.
Of course.
Otherwise, we would have had to retroactively prepare him an X-Men to put him in the X-Men.
That's right.
I think he's the guy that came up with the idea that they were adamantium, and so forth.
Sure.
Of course, I'm very happy about that because I invented adamantium too. So therefore, I was very happy that he did. But that was his idea.
Okay. So no relation to any other kind of metal like vibranium.
No.
What's the stronger one?
Oh, of course, adamantium.
Of course, adamantium. Because that's the one you did.
Well, vibranium has its own thing. It's a great mineral. All it was supposed to do was what? It was supposed to stop missiles from going off course.
That was it.
No, that's great. That's great. Well, I really want some vibranium because I don't want any of my missiles to go off course.
I love that his weakness is magnets.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I invented vibranium, I was doing a story. It didn't matter who the artist was because it's just a metal. It's not like you're designing it.
Yeah. Right.
Barry Smith was the original artist, but that didn't make any difference. The main thing was I had wanted a metal that was the hardest thing there could be. Harder than diamond, harder than anything.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to make up this metal. And I didn't know what to call it, Then I remembered that when I first read this a particular translation by a scholar named Richmond Lattimore, of the Greek tragedian Aeschylus's play Prometheus Bound. In this one thing on the very first page, he uses this adjective that I hadn't really seen before, though it existed, adamantine.
Oh, okay.
Adamantine. It's just an adjective. It's related to the word adamant.
Right.
But adamantine, and I like that word. By the way, also on that first page are two guys that helped bind Prometheus to the rock. They're named Kratos and Bia, and I made them Marvel characters too.
Interesting.
So I thought adamantine is kind of interesting, and that just led naturally to adamantium.
And to add the ION to it.
The word adamantium is used in that by one of my favorite old 1956 movies, Forbidden Planet. I don't know. I don't remember that. I can't find it. It's not in the script as such because I've had copies of the script. But it doesn't matter. I know where I got adamantium from. I'm not that happy with my making up names. I haven't made up that many great names. I mean, Ultron 5 is a great name. It's okay. But I'm really proud of adamantium. I think that's one of the best names I ever made up for anything.
I'm a big fan of it too, my man.
And
it sounds strong.
They still use the Quinjet I made up too.
Well, of course, because it's fantastic, man.
Because instead of Twinjet, I said, well, if there's a Twinjet, why not a Quinjet? We'll have 5 of them, But that's just
awesome,
kind of
man.
crazy. Stan and I, Kirby too, for that matter, we didn't know anything about technology. Jack could draw it, but he didn't know anything about it. And Stan would say everything was feedback. He actually used the term feedback in his stories. He didn't know what. Stan and I, we knew nothing about science. We just kind of faked it all through,
Well, you could have fooled me because it's a masterpiece. Everything you guys have touched. So thank you so much, man. Really, really appreciate you sitting with us and talking about this stuff. It just means a lot to a lot of people, especially me.
Thank you.